Hi everybody, welcome back to my channel. Today we're making tofu and veggie dumplings. For the filling we need a half a block of extra firm tofu. We need to press out as much liquid as possible. So I'm just popping this into my tofu press, adding a little weight and letting that sit for half an hour. We also need to chop up 6 shiitake mushrooms. You could use fresh or dehydrated. If you have the dried ones, just rehydrate them in a little hot water. It's whatever you have on hand. We're going to pop these into a separate bowl because they're going to cook separately. We also need to chop up about 1.5 cups of cabbage. I'm just using regular cabbage. If you have Napa cabbage, use that. Just chopping this into little strips as thin as possible and then into a fine dice. We can put this into a large bowl and set that aside while we chop up a cup of carrot. So again, I like to cut this on a bias into little planks and then into strips and then into a small dice. We don't want these to be very large because we don't want them to poke through the dumpling dough. So just giving these a nice little choppity chop up as well. And this can go into the same bowl as cabbage. Now we can crumble in a half of a block of extra firm tofu. I'm going to press out a little bit more of this liquid because it feels a little wet. We don't want a very wet filling. We want it to be a little drier. So just using a kitchen towel and giving this a little press just to push out any of that excess moisture. I'm just going to take half of this block and crumble this in. Now for that extra tofu that you have left over, the easiest way to store this to keep it fresh is to put it into a Ziploc bag or container with clean water and then go in and change the water every day. Now for our flavorings, we have some ginger, clove, scallion, and szechuan peppercorns. We just need 1 clove of garlic, giving this a nice little fine mince. And we're going to put this into a heat-proof bowl because we're going to flash fry it with a little veggie oil. We also need about 2 teaspoons of minced ginger. We're also going to chop up 1 scallion, the white and the green parts. And then we're going to take about a teaspoon of Szechuan peppercorn. And we're going to grind this up. I got this nice little spice grinder. It's cast iron and I'm super excited to use it. Where we're going to give this a nice fine grind and put this into the same bowl as our scallion, garlic, and ginger. Then we're going to take 2 tablespoons of hot vegetable oil and carefully pour this over the top. Just be careful because it is going to pop. Then we're going to add in 3 tablespoons of regular soy sauce and 3 tablespoons of shaoxing wine. We're going to give this a good mix, and that is our seasoning for our filling. Now over on the stove, in a dry pan with no salt, nothing, we're just going to tip in all of our mushrooms, and we're going to let this cook for 5 to 8 minutes. We want to bring out that inherent earthiness. This is going to add a depth of flavor. After 5 to 8 minutes, we can add in the rest of the filling ingredients. Give this a little stir, and then we're going to add in our hot oil mixture of aromatics. And we're just going to cook this until the carrot tenderizes a little bit and the cabbage, which should take about 5 to 10 minutes, depending on the heat of your stove. We're going to give this a little taste and add a little additional seasoning with a half teaspoon of kosher salt and a half teaspoon of freshly ground white pepper. And this is pretty much done. We're going to set this aside and let this cool completely. For the dough, we need to blanch 5 ounces of spinach because we're doing little dumplings that look like bok choy. So only 10 seconds into some hot water. Pull this out of the heat and pop this directly into a blender or food processor. Then we're going to add in 2 tablespoons of cold water and puree this up as finely as possible. We're just locking in that vibrant green color with the blanching. Then we're going to tip this into 1 cup of all-purpose flour, mixing that up until that green colors our flour and we get a nice, beautiful dough. This is one of the easiest doughs that you can actually make. So just stirring around with my chopsticks And once that's pretty much incorporated, getting in there with your hands and kneading this thoroughly until you get a nice, beautiful, cohesive dough. And I love this beautiful, vibrant green color. I'm pretty excited with what we're going to do with this. We're going to wrap this into some plastic wrap, just so that dough can hydrate, and let that sit for an hour. With the white dough, we're going to add in 1/4 teaspoon of kosher salt, and slowly add in about 1/4 cup of cold water. We're not doing a hot water dough this time. The hot water dough is a little bit more supple. This is going to be a little stiffer. So just keep adding water in increments, because you can always add more. You can't take it away until this starts to come together. Again, just mixing with chopsticks and then getting in there with your hands and kneading this until you get a nice, smooth, cohesive dough. And again, wrapping this up and letting this rest for an hour. Now, after an hour, we can unwrap our white dough and give this a little knead on a lightly floured workbench. Then we are going to roll this into a long tube as evenly as possible. Then we're going to take our green dough, give this a little knead as well, dusting as needed with extra flour, and we're going to roll this out into a flat surface that's a little larger than our white rope of dough. But you want the edges to be thinner than the center, because we are going to overlap them and we don't want it to get too bulky. So rolling this out into somewhat of a rectangular shape, it doesn't have to be perfect, and flouring as needed. This dough is a little softer than the white dough. So just going in and kneading and stretching this out, making sure the edges are thinner. Then we're going to place our rope white dough on one edge, and we're going to roll this up as tightly as possible. We don't want any air bubbles in this. So just slowly and surely rolling this up. And once you get to the end, giving this another roll to seal those edges. Once that's all sealed up, we can take a sharp knife. We're going to cut this into thirds. And you can see this is really beautiful. You have that nice white center and that vibrant green outside. Then we're going to take each of the pieces and cut them into smaller pieces. And to form the dumplings, you want to dust with a little all-purpose flour, smush it down with your hand, and then roll this out into a disc with the edges thinner than the center. Then we're going to add in about a teaspoon of our cooled down filling, fold this over in half into a half moon shape, sealing the edges. Then we're going to pick this up and use our thumbs to start crimping in those edges. We want this to look like little bok choy leaves or little cabbage leaves. So just take your time. This is where you get to be artistic while you cook. And this is looking adorable. So again, really quickly, just forming a little disc with our section of dough, filling with a teaspoon of our tofu and veggie filling, folding this in half, sealing it down, and then pressing and crimping with our thumbs to make little leaves on the edges. So cute. Now into a large saute pan, we're going to add in 2 tablespoons of vegetable oil over medium-high heat. We're going to start placing in our dumplings, leaving a little space. And we're going to let these cook until those bottoms crisp up a little bit. These are looking great, so we're going to add in 1/4 cup of water. We're going to immediately cover this with the lid and let this steam until that water evaporates. Now I've just plated some onto a nice plate with a dipping sauce of your choice, and now we can give this a taste. The veggie filling is so flavorful. You get that earthiness from the shiitake mushrooms. You get almost a meatiness from the tofu. The aromatic oil that we made has added so much flavor to this. The dough itself is tender but crispy on the bottom. And these are not only adorable to look at, but absolutely delicious. And I will definitely be making these again. If you don't cook all of these in one serving, just put them out on a sheet tray with some parchment paper, making sure they don't touch. Pop those in the freezer and then store them later. But there they are, veggie and tofu dumplings. I really do hope you all try to make these at home. Thank you so much for spending some time with me today. I really do appreciate it. If you liked this video, give it a like. If you loved it, please consider subscribing and hitting that notification bell because I put out new videos every Thursday. Thank you again, and until next time, happy cooking.